So we're on to day 3 of the Becoming Athletic Aesthetic program, and today's a leg day. So we start off here with 5 sets of 8 to 10 on front squats. You can see here that I'd like to start I start every single squat workout. Pretty much the very first rep will always be a pause squat, just to give me a bit of an idea of depth, check that I'm feeling all good. Recently I've been in a lot of pain. I've had as you can see, I've got some strapping on my right knee for, I think it's patellar tendonitis, and my left leg, the quad, I got a dead leg a little while back in one of the league games that we had, and it's just been giving me jip ever since. So yeah, pretty happy with how this leg session went. I was surprised. Tips here, I always start by getting my hands in the correct position, so normally just outside shoulders. Then I place my feet underneath the bar, and then from there I screw myself into position, as you can see here. Then take a couple of steps back. I always try and keep that the same. So I normally take about 3 steps back, left, right, and then the left foot is the final placement. Here I'm just trying to always think about keeping my elbows up throughout the movement, so trying to get my triceps parallel with the floor. And also I'm thinking about screwing my feet into the floor, so while I'm going down, which you'll see in the next clip, the knees are coming outwards, which is allowing me to sink into my hips, which gives me a greater range of motion. This will then really help me stay upright and make sure that my abs are staying tight, everything in my midsection is nice and strong, and all the load is going to where it should do, which is onto the quads and through the midsection. So we then go into probably my favorite hamstring exercise, which is Romanian deadlifts. Now this in the program calls for 5 sets of 8 to 12. Some tips here I tell all my clients is make sure, first of all, shoulders are retracted. That will keep your hamstrings fully engaged. And then from there, you want to think about loading your hips backwards towards the wall. So as you can see here, I'm trying to keep as much tension in the hammies by pushing my hips back, finding that tension at the bottom and having the slightest of pauses. With that movement, what you'll find is as your hips come back, you'll feel your hamstrings go to full tension. Now for some, that may not be that far down. You can see here that I get a pretty good range of motion. But for some, it may be maybe even just above their knees. So that's where their hamstring flexibility will allow them. But what you'll find is by keeping your shoulders retracted, you'll be able to find how far down you can actually go. Now here, the idea is I'm trying to keep that bar as close to the body as possible, making sure I'm feeling the stretch in the hamstrings and not in the back at all. And then at the bottom of the stretch, I'm then thinking about engaging my glutes and pulling them right through to the bar and creating as much power as possible. I get a few questions a lot of the time, like what's the difference between these and normal deadlifts? Well, I think it's pretty clear here. You can see this is pretty much a hamstring dominant movement, whereas a deadlift then incorporates a lot more of your back and other muscles as well. And if you're still unsure, check the workout number 2 from week 1. The very first exercise is deadlift, so you can compare these 2 exercises so you can understand the differences. So on to leg press, and it's 4 sets of 10 to 12. Now you can see here, first thing, foot placement. Now the higher up your feet go, the more hamstrings and glutes you're going to get engaged. The lower down, the more quads. You can see my toes here are slightly pointed out. What that's going to do, that's going to enable me to keep my knees outside the chest so I can get a big stretch into the hips. That will just mean that I'll get a bigger range of motion. Now some mistakes I see other people do. Firstly, they let their hips come off the pad. As you can see here where my bum is, most people will let their bum come off, which just means you're loading into that lower back. Another mistake is people pushing through their toes. You want to make sure you're focusing driving all through the heels, and also don't lock out the legs completely. Here I've still got constant tension into the quads, so make sure when you are doing it that you're keeping the load where you want to be. And lastly, make sure when you're coming down with the weight, don't let your knees buckle in. That means your knees are going to take an absolute battering, so be careful there. Now lastly, the program calls for some barbell walking lunges. Now, there was also some standing calf raises, but I just didn't have the time to get them done, so I'll have to do them in tomorrow's session, which will be shoulders and arms. But yeah, some main tips here. as you're taking a step, take a long enough step so your knees are not going to go in front of your toes on the way down. You can see here my shin stays quite vertical throughout that movement. Now also, as you're taking the step, make sure each time you're driving through the heel. Most people, not most people, I see a lot of people go all through their toes, which means all they're doing is loading right into the kneecaps, and that's not really a place where you want to be loading. So throughout this movement here, I do try and keep at least a hip width stance. Sometimes as you tire, as most people will, your legs are going to slightly come a little bit closer, but what I like to do is stop in the middle of each rep just to make sure I've reset myself and know what I'm going to be doing. Because as I said, with these being a walking movement, you want to make sure you create as much tension as possible so you can keep as much balance as you can throughout the movement. So I know it's not been a massively long video, but I hope you are enjoying these little walkthroughs of my workouts, and that I hope you guys are joining in with them as well. As always, if you do have any questions, leave them in the comment box below or catch me on any of my social medias. Pretty much everything is just at RobStubbsPT, or Snapchat is the only one, which is RobStubbs89. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.